and welcome. You're tuning in to Unbreakable Hope with me, your host, Jessica Rose. This podcast is all about seeking the light. In each episode, we chat with someone who has either overcome the darkness or who is actively spreading light within their own community. So let's jump into today's episode. Today, I am thrilled to introduce to you Jess Timmerman, who has a beautiful story of love, honor, and a positive community impact. So get ready to be inspired as we hear her incredible journey and what she has coming up. All right, Jess, I'm going to pass it over to you. I would love for you to be able to introduce yourself a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Jessica. So, Jessica Rose and I both live in Oklahoma, and we were both passionate military veteran and their family supporters. Jessica and her husband served in the armed forces, and I am in this world because my brother was active duty Army infantry for 15 years. My brother, Sergeant First Class Zachary Morgan Brown, passed by suicide on Mother's Day 2022 while he was on active duty in Germany. Since his passing, we were extremely close, almost like codependently close. So it's been an adjustment, and it's been a hell of a ride, really. Some days they're terrible. Some days I'm like, it's just such a blessing. He was so loud in life, and he's so loud wherever he is on the other side. I get these opportunities like this podcast to talk about military suicide and how hopefully we can help these individuals. Zach and I's story is we kind of shared the same childhood trauma. My unexpectedly passed when I was 13, and my brother was 11, and then my mom fell into her own demons, so we were on our own after high school. He went into the military, I went to college and bartended my way through. And we just kind of never dealt with our childhood stuff. You just kind of outrun it. My brother had a rough last 6 months. We all know what happened in 2020. He was in Germany. His marriage was in a tough spot. If you're an infantryman, any of you people, armed services, Jessica, you just told me you can't sit down at a charity event. So you guys are used to being so active. So the fact that these mortarmen, sat on the couch for all those times, drinking becomes more, and your demons kind of overpower you. So I've really been trying on my good days to help people like my brother. I don't want anyone to fall through the crack, because there's a lot of bad information out there. And what Zach's passing, he really thought he was doing the most selfless thing. Like, there was nothing selfish about it. He was in a lot of pain, and he didn't want to take those down around him. So I really try to find any organization, anything in my community, any person I can talk to help share the light of these souls that were so brave and courageous and just didn't know how to get by.
I love that you bring up a lot of really good points, like trying to outrun our childhood stuff. Because a lot of the times for generations, it's just like, suck it up, stuff it down, suck it up, stuff it down. But eventually it comes out. And there's a book, How the Body Keeps Score. Like, it's still there. We still need to deal with it. And you're right. You're saying that demons overpower you. I talk about the darkness consuming you. It's the same thing. It's still there. It's still hanging on to us in some form or fashion. So trying to find ways through it. And something you see that's very prevalent in a lot of first responder fields. So military, even our medical, fire, police, is going to be coping things that are socially acceptable, like alcohol. And even a lot of drugs are becoming socially acceptable. So trying to find ways that I thought this was good coping, I'm getting some socialization, but this isn't really the best for me long term. What can I do, especially when you become habitual and you can't live without it in a bad way? I also love that you brought up that your brother's passing, that it wasn't selfish. And I think that's what we see a lot when it comes to people talking about suicides, is it's not selfish. It's, I believe how you worded it was that he didn't want to take others down with him. He saw that he was downward spiraling. And a lot of times suicide is love and those aspects. And people need to be heard, people need to be seen, but people also recognize when they're at a point that, I hear it from one of my family members all the time. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a burden. And that weight of this idea of what is a burden and how can we judge and expect what a burden is on somebody else. So I think that that's just you being able to tell your story. I want to thank you first of all because I know it's got to be hard. No matter how many days, no matter how many years pass, it'll still be hard to have to look back and think back on this because with suicide, we're always left wondering, we're always left questioning, but a loss is a loss. You still lost your best friend. How would you say? You said that the person you were codependent with, you made it through so much life together, and that's something very special. And it sounds horrible to say. I'm excited to see what you're doing with this though, and how many people's lives that you're able to impact and share just by sharing some of those key points right there alone. And I know you have a big event coming up. I would love to be able to talk more about that event, what that event means to you, how people can get involved, because I think it's something really, really special that we can share.
Sure. When you feel called into a helping role, it can feel a little overwhelming, especially in the military veteran community. There's so many amazing, huge nonprofits, the TAPs, the Mission 22s, and there's so many grassroots ones. Like you wish you could clone yourself and help everybody, and then at the end of the day, you're like, what am I doing? Am I making a difference? Is this selfish? Am I just trying to fill the hole in my heart with activities? So I just support everyone that I meet there are so many people doing cool things, veterans that take people out kayaking. There's golf tournaments. So with all that being said, I can sign up and volunteer, but if I'm just telling my story on the internet, I'm not really it's kind of like Slack activism. I think like my pastor would say it's like like putting your Facebook profile, you care about this, but you're not really doing anything. So in my community, there are a ton of Oklahoma is a wonderful place for military and veterans, and I think a considerable amount choose to retire here. But it seems like there could be sometimes you see a lot of the same people at the same events, and that's awesome. That's community. We get together for that. But we're missing, civilians sometimes feel like it's a subculture they can't infiltrate. And that I think is like a healing piece to this. Like, how can every suicide affects the 135 people, they say, right? So Zach's 135, I could make guesses at them, but there are people that relate to his story that I have never met that might be my neighbor because we don't talk about this. So when I was thinking of things I could do in college, my friends and I would always run I lived in Baltimore in the St. Patrick's Day 5K, and it'd be so fun because you just have your best friends. You didn't care how fast you ran. There was beer afterward. It was just a day where you got to wear a stupid race shirt and have fun. And I had this idea. People talked me out of it. It's a lot of work. You don't make a ton, but I didn't care, So I pitched the city of Edmond last year. Mitch Park is right in my backyard. If I need space to walk when I'm overwhelmed, that's where I walk. So I just started applying for permits, sending emails, asking people for donations. I tell my sad story to everyone, hoping they'll sign up for $30 for a race t-shirt, a medal, and some pizza. So yes, this year will be our second one, Saturday, November 9th. The race starts at 2, but around 1:30, the University of Central Oklahoma's Color Guard will do a procession. We've had a really hot fall, so I think no one wants to commit what could potentially be a beautiful weekend to running, but we would love to have everyone there. Like I said, with the entrance fee, you get a shirt, a medal, there's pizza, there's water, all the money raised from the sponsorships last year went to Mission 22. I was trying to keep it in-house, local. So this year's money will go to the Hugs Project, which is in Oklahoma City, and they provide care packages. They still have a big warehouse, send out candy canes at Christmas. So the proceeds will go to them. And then also at the start and finish line, we'll be featuring a lot of military veteran nonprofits, some recreational activities that people like to do, like rock climbing, just hoping for a community, family-friendly day outside, supporting all of your service. So.
I love that. And I'm hoping the weather will be good. We've had a little bit of a cold front come in. I'm regretting it. I signed up for a marathon at the end of November. Why? I have no clue. But actually, it's spend time with friends. So just like you were saying, how you thought, man, 5Ks were fun. It was just something to go out and experience with friends and have fun. And I think that's great. And I love how you said, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna start making phone calls and I'm just gonna do it. And it is so important because we need to honor our loved ones. We need to talk about this. The more we put stuff in boxes, the more we make it taboo, the more it's hindering everyone. Like you said, all those lives that are touched are lives that you'll never meet because if you can help one person, chances are that one person's going to hear your story and your message and be able to tell more people. And that's what I'm hoping with this podcast is that we're able to share these stories and touch more and more people who have never met you, who've never met Zach, but is going to be inspired and say, you know what, I want to do something. Something that inspired me by what you were saying is, yeah, you know what? There are a lot of amazing organizations, a lot of big name ones that everybody supports. That's great. There's a lot of grassroots ones, also great. But being able to be a mover in that space and what that looks like for you and how you're going to be helping support the Hugs Project, I just adore them. They are super sweet. So shout out to the Hugs Project. And that's something too. You're like, hey, I'm putting on this 5K. I'm going to be able to talk about my brother and share this message and connect with people. But I'm also supporting an organization that's doing good stuff too. That's also a way of connecting with people. And I think that's just so wonderful. And I think that's a great message for people who are listening is saying, hey, I want to get involved. You can volunteer at events. You can do your own event and still raise funds for another event, whether it's a big name or grassroots. And I just think that's absolutely wonderful. I know you also mentioned at the end of the run, you're going to have a lot of different resources out there to be able to support and give back. And this is your second run. Do you have a goal with how many resources you're hoping to get out there?
My husband is very business person, right? So after the first one, he wanted like a pros, cons, like a gains, losses sheet. And there's so many things that can't be seen on that. I just hope that I can get people there. And the magic really is with these people that we have no idea we have stories in common with. I last year on my first one, my son was in pre-K, and I don't know why. I normally am not so open with strangers, but I was trying to get her to run. And I was like, telling about my brother, and she said, "Oh my gosh, my cousin, also military, also passed that way." I would have never known that. So I just hope um, trying to get more people there, hence the free pizza and beer. And then today I added a kids fun run challenge, and my daughter is on a 9 and under soccer team, and then a friend, he coaches a 9 and under baseball team. And I said, what if we had like a fastest team award? So you have to have like more than 4 kids and average out mile time, because then, it gets more people there. Parents have to drive the kids there. They can see the resources. I also saying that some of the gains, can't be seen by my husband on the business side. Last year, a man showed up. He, very tall guy, 6'5", in his 80s. It came out that he did not tell his family he was there. He has some sort of pre-dementia, had snuck out because this was important, was wearing his green beret, his short shorts, was a veteran himself. He came up to the timers and said, I just want to do this. It's really important to me. He said, I don't want to be out there all day. Like, can I start before everyone? Because I have bad hips and it's going to take me a while. And a friend of mine walked with him. It took him an hour and 5 minutes, but and by the time his granddaughter showed up and retrieved him, she was like, you can't do that. But it was just so special that, I have no idea how he even found out about it. I'm not great at advertising yet, but those things can't be seen on a pros and cons. So
Yeah, that's something as a researcher, the qualitative and quantitative data. And I think in the work that we do and the passions that we have, it's always one. Can we reach one? Can we change one? Because we're never going to know. We're never going to know
right.
truly how many lives we've saved with this. And I love even involving kids. I tried to get an initiative started with a baseball program locally because, in October, everyone wears pink. But
Right.
I'll try not to get on my soapbox, but according to the CDC, they have this chart, the 10 leading causes of death. If you want to hear why, it's a load of crap. We'll post something about that later. But if we're just going off this chart, the second leading cause of death from ages 10 to almost 34 is suicide. So being able to involve kids in these conversations, it's not like they don't know it's happening. It is happening, and it is happening at just shocking numbers. Every time I do a training or presentation and I talk about the youth numbers, that is what people are most surprised about. And I think it's important to include them. If we're going to
Yeah.
paint a whole school pink, right, then we should be willing to paint it purple and teal. We should be willing
Totally.
to talk about it. And I'm really excited about your youth event. And I have a ton of socks. Maybe I could bring the socks to donate. I have a
Okay.
bunch of purple and teals. So that would be really fun. I think that's going to be really exciting.
You are right about the youth thing. Sorry, tangent away from military and things, but I had to chaperone on my daughter's like fifth grade Girl Scout camp out, and a girl that doesn't go to her school, a different Edmond public school, was talking about how the fifth graders have like hard talk Friday. I don't know what the thing is called. Clearly, suicide was the topic, and she doesn't know any of my story, and I don't know what her parents' thing is on that, but I wanted in those moments when she's like, you know what we talked about today? And I was like, oh, how did that make you feel? Like, I just think with these kids, it's so important that they know that we're safe adults, and there are people out there, which like, makes me happy locally, like Heroes in Waiting, right? They've been getting into schools like anti-bullying, suicide prevention. The kids are a huge thing.
If you ever saw the show The Big C, like was it like 2 decades ago? Like, oh, cancer. And yeah, sure, I still experience that a little bit with my husband, but suicide, I had a contract with a magazine where I could not write the word suicide because it was a trigger word. And I thought, this is literally what I do. What do you mean? So I had to find creative ways to talk about a subject that I encourage other people to talk about directly. I called it the big S
Uh-huh.
because
Smart.
that's how we treat it. And we are so scared, like, oh my gosh, what if we say something? And then like, especially with youth, oh, if their parent gets mad and all this kind of stuff. But it's just like I use the example, and a lot of people aren't fans of this, but I think it's a great example. Teen pregnancy. If we want to pretend like abstinence is the only way and we want to preach abstinence every day, we're not talking about the actual topic. We're not talking
Totally.
about something that is eventually going to happen, whatever that looks like. So we're avoiding it, in my opinion. Like, sure, if you want to say, hey, abstinence is better, great, but let's actually talk about what this means. It's the same thing with suicide, is that we see a lot of, oh, just suck it up, or it can't be that bad. A lot of invalidated things. And with youth, like I said, kind of like veering from military veterans, but I think this also ties into adults. With youth, when they have overwhelming days, we who are 2, 3, 4 times older than them, we think, wow, that's it. You're crying over that. That's their world in that moment.
Totally.
And we forget
Totally.
that. So with our military and our veterans, we also forget that a lot of us join to get away from situations, to try and improve situations. So we're coming into the military already experiencing traumas that can later be triggered in ways we didn't even know. That's
Right.
something that we forget, and we don't take the moment to validate when pain is pain, and we spend so much time judging people rather than trying to connect through validation.
I agree. It's very sad.
It's something that I think is going to take generations to fix, but I think it's important to have these conversations, to have this 5K, offering the resources. And a lot of the runs that I've seen, especially runs that are fundraising for a certain organization, it's mostly about that organization or maybe a few things that pertain to that organization. But the focus, okay, I did my run, I'm done. And I think it's so great to say, hey, when you're done with your run, like check out all these resources because you may not need them, but you may know somebody who does need them. So I think that's
Right.
going to be really impactful, being able to connect people to resources. And as a resource, we're only as strong as what we know. So being able to partner together and grow together. So I hope that people are listening and they're sharing about this 5K. I'm sending it in my email blast to get people to sign up as well. And I can't wait to see where this goes and grows. Is there other events that you're looking forward to?
Not currently. I very much have this like type A by nature, anxious by nature. I was looking forward to connecting with you this way today, but I was like, I can't just sit around till 12:30. You have to like put movement to all this. That's how I deal. So right now, it's totally 5K. And then November 10th, you have like event hangover and you're like, oh, that's it. I was working so hard. Now it's over. But I'm excited right now to pour whatever I can into that. And if it's you, me, and some kids with pizza, so be it. I think everyone has their ideas on spirituality or whatnot, but to me, anytime I put work into community or service, the universe, God, whatever you say, provides for me. I mean, this whole journey started with me thinking I wanted to be a death doula and emailing someone in Atlanta who then like had me speak at a conference in Portland, but then I also have my own grief and healing in this, right? I sit around and I think, and I have to go back to the drawing board with my own stuff. After this, I have all this stuff. I had wanted to do a podcast, but I really want to write a book, because my brother wasn't just a stat, he was a person. And I think if people can connect personally to his story, because it is so human, even how he got into the military, they would feel called to act. And so really, no, I don't have a next plan. This race, and then see what the universe opens up for me or who it puts in the way. I've met, just even in the last week, I randomly spilled my guts on like our school district's page, and then a veteran himself who had struggled with some of these issues that now helps put on golf tournaments reached out to me. We had lunch last Saturday, and it's just, there's so much connection and healing in those moments, and never want to say you feel good about the shape of the world in the space you and I work in, but optimistic today, right?
Yeah, I love that because there's always going to be darkness. There's the sun and the moon for a reason, but having those spurs of light, obviously you've been on this journey because of a tragedy and you are moving through it and trying to grow through it and help other people grow through what they've been through and be supported through what they're going through. And I think that's really special. I think a lot of us in the suicide prevention realm didn't land here because we wanted to be in suicide prevention when we grew up, right? We were impacted by something, or I joke all the time, like I ended up in suicide prevention on accident. It was just a series of events, and then I did a suicide mortality review and fell in love with the idea of I can help save lives by teaching people to be better humans. Like this is awesome. And I love getting to connect and have those conversations with people, even though most of these conversations stem from some type of tragedy or some type of darkness. Is that we're still trying to find ways to connect, ways to have light, ways to continue to move and honor the people that we've met along the way.
Right. I agree. None of us as fourth graders said at career day, I want to help people impacted by suicide.
I actually was asked to be a guest speaker at a career day. And I want to say it was a fifth grade class. And I thought, really? Like,
What's to talk about?
this is all right. This is gonna be interesting. And it was over Zoom, and they had two classes kind of scooch into one class, and it was really lovely, the interaction and being able to connect with these kids and talk to them about it, and then also encouraging the teachers like, hey, when I said this and this person responded this way, or these people raised their hands, those are the people to offer some extra love and support to right now, because clearly something is going on in
Right.
their lives where they need this. And I also sent like little goodie bags because I thought, who doesn't love goodie bags? And if you're in person at career day, everyone always gives away something. You got to give away like candy or stickers or something like that. And I think it's an important way for us to connect with people is saying, hey, I see you. Hey, here's a piece of candy. It's so simple
Right.
that we make it so difficult.
Definitely.
And it's nice to know how, I was going to ask you this too, how you knew Dr. Quinn.
Oh, yes, that is how I sat around in my sweatpants for months and thought, this can't be my life. I can't believe this happened to me. Clearly this phase of my life is over. What does the next one look like? Started listening to like So clearly I've lost my mom, my dad, and my brother of the four of in my family of four. And then my grandfather passed of Alzheimer's in my brother's like downward spiral. That sounds really depressing, but I am here and I am good. But that was I death is also a taboo subject and I am comfortable with it. And it breaks my heart to think, even despite all these advocacy works, like people do die alone and people are isolated from family. And I don't care if someone is crotchety to me. If they need someone to hold their hand, I have space for that. That is something I'm comfortable with. So that's how this whole thing started. And then we became friends and we talk on Zoom, and she's just been the biggest coach, life supporter. I go through all these things and I'm like, what am I doing? Should I just be a substitute teacher and ignore all this? And she's like, no, just keep going. No, yes, that's how I know her.
I love that. I think she's an amazing human being, and I appreciated her leadership when I was under her for a project. And yeah, it's a great point. You're saying like death alone is a taboo subject, right? So coupled with suicide, leaving everyone with questions. When someone dies of a heart attack, we don't question how many hamburgers we bought them. Or if they die from diabetes, we don't regret ever buying them a birthday cake, right? But with
Right.
suicides, we question everything. We think back to, what was the last thing I said to them? Was I a role in this? And then you internalize a lot, and then you try and point the finger at other people who are also likely internalizing. But that's a great point. We don't talk about death in general. And you've experienced a lot of losses in your young life. So that's hard on anyone, one of those losses. So having to
Right.
navigate through all that and still be able to say, you know what, I want to continue to talk about this. I want to be able to help other people, because you know better than most people how effective all that loss can be, and some ways to be able to move through it the best you can with what you have.
Right. On my bad days, I will be like, this isn't fair. Zach isn't here. And I have to figure out how to get over it, right? That's a bad day mindset, but it's kind of also like a blessing mindset. If I've spent all that time, hiding my wound or what it means to be a survivor, I've never really gotten to know myself. I've never gotten to cultivate hobbies. I get the opportunity to heal my past self and have another 40 years of some sort of future, that is just hiding from all the darkness that's happened. So somebody wise said, you enter life in the middle of a story and you leave in the middle of a story, right? So we're never here the whole thing. So some people are with us on certain parts and not all the rest. And it is what it is. You can't judge it good or bad. So
I love that. That's a beautiful way to look at it. I've never heard that before. I know my husband used to always say, you're guaranteed two things: to live and to die. And everything in between, it's up to you. And but I love how beautiful you said, where you're able to heal your past self so you can have a future self. And I love that. I think that's so important, is that what has happened in the past has happened in the past, but we can find ways to live with it and move through it and move beyond so we can have a future. And I think that's something through the many grief cycles that I go through round and round with my husband still being alive, is it will never be the way it was, but finding a way to make it work in what we have, and then finding a way to still be hopeful and grow for the future, I think is important for all of us, no matter what kind of loss that we've experienced.
you bring up a very heartbreaking one. I'm not comparing brain cancer to Alzheimer's, but the fact the person you loved and have built a life with, that version of them is not there any. My best friend's dad is going through that right now, and she's like, I'm grieving a person I still see, but he doesn't know who I am, and that's another sort of awful, terrible. But there's still love in you and Andrew's story.
That's a
Oh,
great comparison though. I try to make that a lot with people, is that with brain cancer, it's not just like your typical cancer. Of course I'm speaking just very like blunt and plain here. It's like, cool, yeah, okay, you got to go through chemo, got to go through radiation, have a bajillion doctor's appointments, have to deal with the sickness, right? But with brain cancer, I'm dealing with someone who can't talk. I'm dealing with somebody whose personality changes on a regular basis. And there was
right.
a moment where my husband didn't even recognize who I am. So it's kind of this crossover between like, yeah, I'm dealing with cancer, but also it's brain. So it is like this Alzheimer's dementia piece where it affects his personality, it affects his ability to communicate. He can't tell me where he has pain, or that he
Right.
has pain. So there's a lot of similarities and parallels with that. And I think that that's another great example of people having to grieve someone who's still alive because that relationship has changed so dramatically. Certain illnesses, you don't really get the chance to go back, right? Having to say, again, this is where we were, but this is where we are now. And then moving forward, how can we move forward? We're here, right? We're moving forward with the lives that we've been given. And I I want to ask you if you want to share more about your brother. It's really important to be able to have space to be able to share that and be able to talk about that person because oftentimes when someone passes away and you have had the unfortunate experience of this way too many times in your life is people remember in that moment and maybe they remember at the 5K and maybe there's some anniversaries or things like that. But being able to remember every day, which you have to experience for all the loved ones you've lost, being able to share about them and share the good and share maybe some fun stories about your brother if you would like to.
We'll go back to the Zach, but I would somehow in this, I was like, why don't they have a military base per year murder suicide total, right? Because if you listen to podcasts, you can get murders happened on bases, right? But then somebody pointed out, well, that's a national security risk if you telling which bases people feel more isolation. But so yes, the data stuff.
Yeah.
The Zach stuff. So we were 2 years apart. My dad had a job where we moved around a lot. He worked for Lockheed Martin. So we had to be around each other, when you didn't have friends. But he just is so loud and he has to be like the center of attention. I still think it's probably pulling like strings now. Like he's somewhere else and I'm here and we're talking about him. He would joke he was like 6'4" and I'm 5'7". So he would call me his little sister and I'd be like, that doesn't even make any sense. He just never thought things through, not in the lost way, in the funny way. He and a friend, we lived in Colorado. At the time, you couldn't buy fireworks there, but you could if you went over the border to Wyoming. So as like seniors in high school, they grabbed some fireworks and he was just so excited to get back and light them. And I think he lit them in the house and then like realized this was really dumb and had to like throw it in a toilet and a toilet exploded. He just was this like character. But I was on, so my brother left behind a wife and a son. His son is now, he'll be 8 this in November. But we were on vacation with them. His wife and I were in the same college circle. We worked at a sports bar. We were in the Smoky Mountains this summer, 5 families and the kids all playing. And my husband was saying something like, do you think, David is being raised by a different dad now? Like, do you think he'll forget his Zachness? Like, literally said this as we're leaving the water park. And my nephew and my oldest daughter, we get back to the house. I'm in the kitchen, like making dinner. They're playing in the pool. We can hear it. We can see it. My daughter sprints up the stairs. She's like, call 911. I'm like, you've been down there for 2 minutes. Why couldn't he tried to do a backflip into a pool, cracked his head open, had to get airlifted out of there. He turned out completely fine. It was like the most thorough cut. But I did like look at my husband. I was like, no, that was 100% Zach. Nature, nurture. He is still like, my poor nephew has to be coached out of some of his decision-making things. No, but he was such a light and he loved everyone so much. And it's a shame he was the guy that would have done anything for everybody. When we both worked at the same summer camp, but not in the same years. You have a lot of international staff there. And so when you would have a day off, I mean, he would like adopt all these guys in. He'd like show up at my apartment with, Marcus from South America, and he'd be like, we have to have a party. We have to show these guys America. He had such a big heart. And I know in the ways that we can do things, that's the best way to honor his legacy. He just wanted the best for everyone. And so he was a character. And I get work, us talking about like Alzheimer, all these things. I'm like, I'm going to forget, but I won't. I mean, he's so loud. And I think he's still loud. Like sometimes like lights go off in my house and I think my one kid will say, Uncle Zach's messing with us. And I said, he might be. I don't know. But
I love
yeah.
that so much. And then being able to have that nephew where you're like, yeah, no, 100%. Like, that is a mini version of your brother. That's really cool. And that I'm imagining a very big, crazy fireworks party somewhere. Like they do like bonfires and stuff like that. Like,
Yes. Well,
and now I'm
that's what,
thinking,
and I haven't talked to that circle of his friends. It's like his high school friends and a couple, he was in a fraternity in college. His birthday's actually in 2 days on the 17th. The first 2 years, they would have a little birthday like cookout for him. So haven't talked to them to see if they're doing that this year, but I'm sure they'll say ridiculous stories and then it's still like keeping him alive. So
I love that. We do that for a niece on my husband's side who passed away, is that we get together and we take a shot and we say like what we think she could have been. I remember the day she was born, and I remember seeing her in the hospital and going through all that. And I think of those moments where I think that's another loss. Like it lives with you forever. And finding ways to still remember and honor that person. And I just imagine you like as you're talking about your brother, of you two just like being twins. Like when you mention him, I could just be like, you guys are like twins.
that's exactly how it felt. A sibling loss is something it seems like you have to qualify, which you don't, with like if you lose your mom or your dad, no one says, are you close? And so, but when at the beginning, when I felt like I had to explain myself, which I don't do so much anymore, that's what I said, like twins, I just feel like half of me isn't here.
That's a really good point too, is that I have three older brothers and one I have no communication with whatsoever. So you're right. When people say stuff like, you're like, oh, well, were you close? Like, did it matter? And it's like, well, I'm talking about it, right? Or I mentioned it, right? I think it does. Like,
Right.
that goes back to what we were saying, is like talking about death is so taboo that when people do talk about it, it's so awkward. And people don't mean, at least, my always looking for the good in people's heart, right? People, I don't think mean to be awkward or offensive, but people say some weird stuff
Oh,
when
totally.
people die. And you're just like, that's what you thought of? And then it's weird the things that then stick with you of what somebody else said. It's very interesting for
To
sure.
me, I can always remember like facial expressions. So, like RBF is like the saying, but there's also sayings like you or I, like telling our stories. You can see the people automatically that like can't make eye contact anymore. They just go straight to the floor or they look for anything to get out of there. They're like, oh my gosh, I think my car is getting broken. It's so awkward. And I just wish people would like joke about, or whatever, just have some sort of expression that I can work with. But
Yes. I I know exactly what you're talking about. When I'm at networking events and people ask what I do, I'm like, oh, I do suicide and overdose prevention education advocacy work. And it's like, oh, and a lot of people ask me, do I work with schools? I said, well, my nichiness is service members, veterans, and their families. Oh, they really need that. And then it's like, good luck, and you're like,
it's like the talking point, the blurb, the buy your NFL, salute to service. I'm out. I can't.
yeah.
I know. There's so much room for growth. There's so much room there.
Oh, 100%. I think that's so true. And I think the more we talk about it and the more we share these stories, maybe the more likely people are to talk about it. Because I think, in my experience, saying nothing is worse than saying something. Because if you say something, like you said, there's a facial reaction. If somebody says something off the wall and I'm like, what the did you just say to me? They can always be like, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or I'm sorry, or there's some type of reactionary thing. But it's the not
Yes.
saying anything, that's where the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling like nobody cares or nobody gets you, is people being too afraid to say something. And I say this a lot when it comes to suicide prevention, is people are so scared to say the S word. Think of how scary it is to be the person who is thinking that they would rather be dead than alive. Like, that's
Right.
how much they got going on in their life, and you can't say a word. It's a
Right.
word. Um,
Right.
it's
Yeah, there's no validation of their experience, their suffering. It is sad. I don't know if this is like an American problem, but it seems like we want to be polite. So we can't think of the right thing to say, so we don't say anything, which is wrong. At least if somebody said offensive, you might have like a laugh about it. You might, or you a coachable moment, or I mean, you and I aren't perfect either. I'm not good with ASL anymore, but when I was bartending, there was a guy that was like very loud, like demanding attention, right? And then he like signed something and I was like, I know sign too. And then it turns out like that was like one of my favorite regulars, you know? He was like trying to smack talk me, but we had a banter and we got through it.
I
I
love that.
know.
That's another great example, and I think another example people can tie to is people who are deaf. I used to be an interpreter for ASL too, and you don't use it, you lose it, you forget a lot. So
Totally.
I remember a woman coming in. I was still active duty working at the ID card center, and she came in very frustrated. She was like, oh, like getting out a notepad to write. And I realized I was like, oh, are you deaf? And she's like, yeah. So I started talking to her and she was so frustrated. She's like, no, like I'm just gonna write it down. It's fine. And I was like, no, I can actually talk to you. So when she realized like, oh, you really do know sign language, you really are willing to help me, I then went with her to the TRICARE office to help
Yeah.
communicate there. So she was just like, oh my goodness, I didn't have to spend all this time writing back and forth because that gets really frustrating for people. So even just taking the second to notice that and say, hey, let me try, let me see you. That's a really great example of a visual for when it comes
Yeah.
to our mental health as well, right? Is that you can't see that someone is deaf until you see it. Is that a good way to describe it? Once you realize like, oh, that's what's going on here, let me try and help. And if all you have is a pen and piece of paper, that's still an option. But then same thing with our mental health. Once you see that there's an option, using your words are huge, being able to use your words. And if that isn't something you can do, even just sitting with the person, the physical presence is also huge too.
Right. It's such a good analogy what you did there, right? So we can't fix things, we can't cure things, but you can sit with people. I mean, it would have been easier for you to brush off that lady, right? I mean, it probably took more effort to walk with her, but she probably felt seen and heard and didn't have to fight for herself. I'm sure she went home and cried or whatever, that sense of relief that somebody saw her. And it's just, it can be a lonely place out there. We are in a group that, is disadvantaged, and there are people out there that don't have your best interest, and to connect with people, and it's life-saving, I think. I mean, I guess I don't have the numbers on it, but I'm sure you made a difference in that lady's day.
I do think that that's something too, is as we talked about data a few times, that qualitative and quantitative, like there's so much we can do that's life saving. We will never know. We will never be able to measure. When you're just having a really bad day, or you're off and you're like, I'm just trying to get through this day. And something as simple as someone holding the door open for you, you're like, whoa. It it catches you off guard.
Knocked you out of that. You said, oh, somebody thought enough of me to hold the door.
Yes. Or like, wow, they saw me. They were willing to give me 2 seconds of their time. That can completely derail someone's day in a good direction. And we forget that simple acts like that are saving lives every day. We just don't see them. We don't know about them until maybe later when the person's sharing their story on a stage and we hear them and think, oh, hey, I wonder if, that was the person I held the door open for 10 years ago or whatever. It really is those small acts that we can do. I just think about how so many people are stressed out and so many things that they're doing. Like you said, your brother is overwhelmed with, hey, let's do, and now we're not doing, and now we're sitting around a lot, and then internalizing and isolation and everything that just overwhelms and stresses us. There's a lot of different career fields that we see people getting stressed out in, and one that I see the most that just it gets me every time I'm in this situation. The grocery store stalker.
Oh,
So going in there and I'm just, zipping about, grabbing my things, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm in your way. Do you need me to move this?" And they're like panicked, and I'm like, "Whoa, let's take a breath together here." And I'm like, "Hey," I always tell them, "Hey, if you weren't putting it on the shelf, I couldn't buy it, right?" And then normally they're kind of thrown off, like someone opening the door, and then they smile like, "Oh, hey, thanks." Because how many times do we go about and just treat our fellow humans like, yeah, you are my weight. Well, you're welcome for putting things on the shelf for you to come in here and buy them. Like, I'm
right,
glad you have access to these. It's
right.
simple
You're
stuff
right.
like that.
Yeah. Getting irritated, you're behind a landscaping truck, all of those things, right?
Mhm.
Farmer tractor. Guess that's an Oklahoma thing. Farmer tractor on the road. Not relatable. New York, but yeah, it is.
Our expectation, our mindset, and a lot kind of drives our own mental health, and it affects other people's mental health. Like another one that's really changed me, and this was something I was kind of doing before my husband got sick, and now I've kind of stepped it up even more, is I'm driving and you get stuck in traffic, right? And you're just like, oh, this sucks. I'm gonna be late to whatever. Okay. It's like
Right.
late to work, right? The most common thing, everyone's late to work. But there was a wreck. Then you see a wreck and it's like, was there an ambulance? Or maybe you see the ambulance or you
Yeah.
see the fire truck or something. I used to think, you know what? I would rather be late to work than potentially not have a life or have to be the one that's calling my family. I just got in a wreck. I'm having to have surgery or whatever the case may be. Like they're no longer late to work. They are having to take off of work. And
Right.
it's just such a shift in our mindset. And now being someone who's been in an ambulance multiple times and a few times having to run with sirens on, taking that extra second to just, again, what you said, whatever your spirituality is, I pray for the person in the ambulance. I pray for their support system. I pray for everybody in that ambulance and the people receiving them in the hospital because those are also people dealing with their
Right.
own lives. Like I'm sure when your brother passed, you still had a life you had to live, right? You still had to responsibilities, people that relied on you, things that you had to get done, and maybe you were able to take a small pause from that, but at the end of the day, the world does not stop moving forward. Your world has just been shaken.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I always, at the time, I thought of like a roadkill example. It's like you're the armadillo on the side of the road and everyone else is going on, and you're like, how did I get here? Yeah. But
Oh, I love that analogy. Yeah.
again, an Oklahoma thing, I guess, maybe lots of roadkill. You just never know what critters live here until you're driving. Um, it is. It's hard. Yeah, I think being a human is about, it's not about suffering. That sounds very like Old Testament scary. But I mean, we're here to like learn things or whatever and connect with people. So we can't love happiness, right? It's duality. We can't have the light without the dark, or we don't know it's good.
Yes. Have you seen the movie Inside Out?
Yes,
Oh,
one and two. Yeah.
okay. I just watched the first one and then the second one like right after. I can't believe it took me,
Okay.
but that's a great example. So I don't want to like spoil for people who haven't seen the second one,
Oh,
but
yeah, good.
great theme in that one too. And you're just like, yes,
My
yes.
cousin told me she saw on TikTok it was some sort of like school child psychologist that was like, I'm seeing a lot of anger right now. Could we bring some joy to your boards? And I was like, what a good visual for kids.
Oh, that's so great. That's awesome.
Did you cry, laugh? How was your
Oh,
feeling about Inside?
all the feelings that were on the screen were also in the body plus some. I
Do you
just
think they're gonna make a number three when she's like an adult our age dealing with those things?
I hope they do, honestly. Everyone I know who has seen, and so I love for your opinion on this. Everyone I know who has seen one and two have all agreed that the second one is better,
Oh,
but
interesting.
they felt like their kids didn't stick with the second one as much as the first one. I don't know if you had the same feelings where if you felt more connected to the second one.
Yeah, I guess I felt more. I feel like a lot of women our age, like anxiety is our safe place, right? Or maybe not everybody. There's other ones. But it was maybe it's just my kids' age at the time. My kids liked both of them, and my oldest is in fifth grade. She begrudgingly went to the movies with us. It's animated. She wants to see Beetlejuice, right? Um, but I looked over at her and I was like, you relate to this, right? The tween stuff where my younger ones liked, I don't think they got it as much, but they definitely they appreciated it. I mean, they still, if you walk past the anxiety toy at Walmart, they're like, look at that, she goes like this. And yeah. And they're curious of, oh, I'm trying not to give away the movie. But yes, they're curious of things, but they miss some of the points. No, I think they're both so excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's really great. And I think you're never too old for an animated movie. You just feel like you are because you're perceiving other people's judgments, potential judgments, I guess.
Totally. That's probably why the Shrek franchise had so many movies. Those weren't kids going to Shrek 15.
That's a great example. Um, so hitting up on a few other points that I know are kind of near and dear to both of our hearts as we talk about suicide, specifically military and veteran-based suicide. I'd like to hit on a few more things before we wrap up on this because I think that that is something, like I said, it's near and dear to both our hearts. So maybe giving a little bit more time and space to have a conversation specifically geared towards military and veteran suicides. Is there something, since you had a loss as a family member, is there something that you found, maybe an organization or a resource or something that you were able to do or something that was able to help you since your brother was active duty when you lost him?
Sure. I think of this song like Shakira, like try everything. Like that's how it was at the beginning, you know. Taps was a good resource. They assigned me a mentor who also was a surviving sister who had lost her brother. She called me once a month, checked in. That was fantastic. I joined a support group that was specific for suicide loss, and there's a huge one in town, and then there was a smaller one. So the smaller one was really helpful to me in the first year. You know, we all had losses about the same times. All our stories were so different, but some people go a whole, clearly this is like my career now, but there's people that go all the time and don't get to talk about their loved ones. And how lonely is that you're missing your favorite person? And so I think there's really big healing in loss groups. I haven't been able to, with timing, go to like the AFSPs, like Out of the Darkness walks. I know some people really love those. Anytime you can connect with a fellow suicide loss survivor is crucial, which sometimes is hard to do. And then if you can also find a military one, there is great healing in that.
I think that's something that's really great, having all the different options for support groups. I know for myself and going through as a caregiver with my husband with brain cancer, something that I always found was, oh, my cousin's best friend or my aunt's step uncle, you know, it was always these like not spousal relationships.
Tangential relationship.
Which it does make a difference. And I'm glad that you were able to find some support groups that had some niches that were able to connect with. It's harder when you're not able to find one. And I love that you brought up Shakira's Try Everything. I love that song. And it's important that resources are like flavors of ice cream. I'm a chocolate chip cookie dough girl, so don't be giving me no mint chocolate chip because that's not going to work for me. So maybe if you've gone to a group and tried a group and you didn't find a connection, there's so many other groups out there and maybe looking at different niches. I even reached out to some like Alzheimer's groups because I'm like, hey, I have a better understanding of these barriers and these complications that I have with my husband's health. So finding things like that for whatever's going on in your life, especially when you have a suicide loss, different organizations. And yeah, I'm definitely familiar with TAPS too. They do so much great work. I have a friend who they were her big resource when she lost the love of her life, who was a Marine. So being able to connect to resources that are out there and specific to you, if that helps. If you don't have a support group and you're listening to this, please reach out to us because I think it's really important to find a group of people that can support you. And I love that you said that. Just try everything. Like see what we can do to move forward and what works. And if it's not helpful, it's not helpful. Well, we've definitely covered a lot over our chat, and I know we both agree we could talk all day about this, all day about our loved ones and our experiences. So I just want to give you a little bit of time to kind of recap, maybe hit on some key points, remind everyone about the 5K, and then we'll look at closing this out.
The world is a tough place, and we're always on people, especially military and veterans. Like if you're having a tough time, reach out. And that sometimes is unfair. You know, it feels like, for someone wiser, saying a pile of bricks on you. We need to say, I need help now, before we're under the pile of bricks and can't even wave. And then that also goes for all of us that love people, that struggle with mental health, with addiction. I mean, we all struggle, even the together people. We need to ask hard questions. We need to validate people's experiences. We need to love each other more. And I'm just so sorry if anyone listening to this is experiencing a loss of a loved one by suicide. It is truly a unique trauma, and it shouldn't be happening at the rate it does to our military, veterans, first responders. You know, most people maybe have 3 to 5 traumatic events unfold in front of their eyes, and you all, the most bravest and courageous, that's a 4-digit option. Of course, you're going to have bad days. So just if you need help, try anything, try everything, keep going. You're loved.
I love that. Some great reminders to everybody, and not only the people who are overwhelmed to reach out, but those who aren't feeling overwhelmed in the moment, reaching out to others and seeing where it goes. So I hope you found Jess's story as inspiring as I did. And if you're in the area and you can participate in the 5K, or hey, you're welcome to donate, even if you're not physically here to participate. Her journey is definitely a powerful reminder that we go through darkness all the time, but there's always hope and there's things that we can do to make it out on the other side. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you found this episode inspiring, please share it with someone you never know who needs more light in their life. May this serve as a reminder that there's always darkness in the world. Do not let it consume you. Always seek the light. Please take a moment to do the good old subscribe, rate, and review. Your support means so much to me, and it helps me spread more light and love. Until next time, be kind, be loving, be human, and don't ever let anyone steal your hope.